What's up everybody? It's Critic here, and a long time ago, I uploaded a retrospective on one of my favorite cartoons of all time, Spectacular Spider-Man. In that video that barely anybody watched, I told you guys that Spider-Man was my favorite superhero of all time. That hasn't changed. I still love the web-slinger.
My interest in the Spider-Man first began when I caught reruns of both Spider-Man the Animated Series and Spider-Man Unlimited on Jetix. Of course, I was also a huge fan of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, like any other sane person. I didn't get into the actual Spider-Man comic books until I was in the 6th grade, when I picked up the first volume of the awesome Ultimate Spider-Man comic book from my middle school library. Needless to say, I've since gone on to collect many Spider-Man graphic novels and trade paperbacks, and have watched damn near every Spider-Man cartoon and movie that's out there.
There's just no other character who I find more relatable than Peter Parker. His struggles to balance his personal life with his desire to fight crime as a way of honoring his Uncle Ben's memory makes for some pretty engaging storytelling. At least, that's when good writers are handling the character.
Spider-Man has had more than his fair share of awful adaptations, whether it's the horrible Mark Webb films that told incoherent stories and featured supervillains who lacked any reasonable motivations, the disappointing Ultimate Spider-Man show that ditched serious dramatic storytelling in favor of being a fast-paced, lowbrow comedy series a la Teen Titans Go, or the terrible video game adaptation of Spider-Man 3, which had bad controls and graphics so shitty you'd think that the game came out in the early 90s.
One thing that all of these adaptations have in common is that on some level, I can appreciate them for adding something new to the mythos of Spider-Man. The Mark Webb films had a pretty decent romantic subplot between Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy. The Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon introduced a whole new generation of viewers to obscure D-list comic book characters like White Tiger. And the Spider-Man 3 video game provides great comedic fodder for Let's Players.
Spider Senses lets you see through the walls and highlight important objects.
It doesn't. Spider Sense does not work like that video game.
Where are you going?
What a hero!
All in a day's work!
All of this leads us to the subject of today's video, Marvel's Spider-Man.
Marvel's Spider-Man is an animated series that began airing on Disney XD in 2017. It serves as the successor to Disney's previous Spider-Man outing, Ultimate Spider-Man, and has so far been around for 3 straight seasons. I have heard quite a few negative things about Marvel's Spider-Man, both from my own friends and from Nintendo's review of the series. I myself didn't want to say anything about it until I watched at least one episode. Lo and behold, a few days ago, I decided to watch the 6-part Origins miniseries that is supposed to be a prologue for the show, and if there's anything that I can say about it after watching that series, it's this.
Marvel's Spider-Man is fucking horrible! The Origins miniseries has to be one of the worst pilots that I have ever seen for any cartoon. I'm not even being hyperbolic here. That is my genuine opinion. It's just bad. And what better way to explain why than to review it? Let's make like Philip DeFranco and just jump into it. Man, okay, that was awful. I'm sorry.
The pilot opens with the show's lazy as hell opening, consisting of nothing more than Spider-Man swinging towards the screen after jumping off of the show's title. Let's actually talk about this opening for a second.
Guess which 2 Spider-Man cartoons have 3-second title cards as their theme songs? It's nice to know that despite having hundreds of billions of dollars, Disney couldn't afford to shell out any money to help the producers of their Spider-Man cartoons compose their own theme songs. That really goes to show just how much care and effort are put into these shows.
The episode starts with Spider-Man swinging through New York City, like he always does. As he passes by the Oscorp building, he begins to reminisce about the day he first developed superpowers. We then go back in time to Peter Parker standing outside of the Oscorp building with his classmates. They're all on a field trip to Oscorp, but as Peter tries to give the security guard keeping watch at the front door his name, we get our first major problem with this cartoon's version of Peter Parker.
Peter Parker. P is in phosphorus, E is in electron, T is in...
Okay, you're on the list. Just wear this at all times.
Wow, my own Oscorp identification badge. I'm like Science Agent Double Helix 7.
If you didn't quite catch what the issue here is, then allow me to explain it to you. It's common knowledge among comic book fans that Peter Parker is a bit of a genius, right? After all, his love of science is one of the most important character traits that are established in his origin story.
Well, throughout this pilot, the writers decide to showcase Peter's intelligence by having him constantly drop random science facts either during his monologues or during the normal conversations he has with other people, a shtick that gets really old really fast.
Remain calm. Remain calm. Containment breach.
Is it a reactor meltdown? Gamma radiation? Asgardian interference?
If you're a true scientist, you can solve any problem with this, using the 5 steps of the scientific method, which are, of course, observation, hypothesis,
Prediction, experimentation, and conclusion. Sorry. I'd say the only thing that unsettles a scientist is something called chance. When a situation has no scientific rhyme or reason. Think fast. If you could gain the powers of any creature in the world, what would it be? Not so easy, huh? Well, statistically speaking, the odds are 147 to 1 that you would choose a spider. I don't know if you know this, but spiders are incredibly strong and have been known to live in every habitat known to man aside from the sea and air, of course. Commonly mislabeled as insects, spiders are actually from the arachnida class. The trophy is made up of 3 different kinds of metal and 2 different dioxides. I know that because I'm really into science.
Do you get it, guys? Peter is like super duper smart. Do you see? Is it sinking in how very ultra smart Peter is?
This issue wouldn't bug me that much if the miniseries explored any other aspect of Peter Parker's personality, but it doesn't. All that the writers focus on from a character development standpoint is Peter being a science whiz.
I know that this is only the pilot episode, but you're setting really low expectations for your show's writing if the only thing that we learn about Peter is that he's intelligent.
Anyhow, once Peter and his class enter the building, Peter notices a spider with odd coloring crawling on the wall. He pulls his phone out and takes a picture of the spider, only to hear an alarm go off right afterwards. Some guys in hazmat suits come by the lab that Peter's class is in, and Peter asks them what's going on.
Some experimental spiders have escaped. You're in no danger. We're collecting them as we speak.
Okay, what kind of fucking security procedures are in place at Oscorp? Dozens of potentially dangerous experimental spiders break free from their cages while they're hosting a group of high schoolers, and their course of action is to just leave the high schoolers in the same room that these spiders are in while they send a couple of guys in hazmat suits to clean up the mess. How fucking stupid are these people? If I were the one managing this lab, I would rush all of the kids over to a safe area to avoid the potential of any of them getting hurt and thus getting a civil lawsuit sent my way. But no, I guess that would just be too much work for Norman Osborn to do.
Spiders? And here I thought we had something to worry about.
Parker,
Huh?
can you please stay out of trouble?
Oh, sorry, Mr. Smythe.
My guy, Peter is just asking what's going on. I don't get what you're snapping at him for.
While the spider situation is being dealt with, Peter and his classmates gather around one of the scientists who work at Oscorp as he gives them a short speech about the wonders of working at the company.
If you're a true scientist, you can solve any problem with this, using the 5 steps of the scientific method, which are, of course, observation, hypothesis,
Prediction, experimentation, and conclusion. Sorry.
Mr. Parker, another outburst from you and I'll kick you to the moon.
Well, scientifically speaking, Mr. Smythe, that's not possible.
Oh yeah, that was so hilarious. I can see why a whole group of teenagers would just burst out laughing at such a sick burn.
While Peter monologues about how chance is the one variable that scientists are scared of, he and his partner Liz Allen are chosen to be the first kids to pilot a robot using 2 separate gloves. Liz switches spots with Peter due to her being a lefty, and as Peter tries to put his glove on, a spider crawls onto his hand and bites him. As he begins to feel woozy from the bite, his classmates laugh at him, for whatever reason. Peter asks his friend Harry where the bathroom is, and Harry gives him the directions.
Down the hall to the right. No, wait, I think that one's under construction.
Hey Peter, wait! You can't go into that restroom yet! Aw, fuck, he's already gone. Well, I suppose I could run after him and make sure that he goes into the right restroom, but oh well, I'm too tired to give a shit. I mean, I'm only Peter's best friend and the son of the guy who owns this place, so what more can I do, you know?
Peter rushes towards the bathroom and finds himself staring at a locked door which has an out of order sign posted on it. He tackles the door multiple times to try and get into the bathroom, but to no avail. Finally, he smacks the door with the palm of his hand, and this happens.
Huh? What in the world's happening to me?
So, Peter has made the realization that he has super strength. I'm sure that the writers will use the rest of this miniseries to really showcase how much these superpowers will impact Peter's life, as well as maybe provide more depth and dimension to the supporting cast of characters, such as Uncle Ben and Aunt May, right? Nah, they don't do any of that shit at all. Let's move on to part 2.
My name is Peter Parker. I just made the entrance of a lifetime. Unfortunately, no one was around to see it. Or should I say, fortunately, no one was around, because I was just bitten by a radioactive spider.
It's a good thing that the employees at Oscorp didn't escort me or any of my classmates to safety when experimental spiders got loose into the lab that we were visiting.
Peter begins to sweat profusely, so he takes most of his clothes off and splashes his face with water in an effort to cool himself off. Once he's finished with that, he grabs a paper towel and dries his face off. He then tries to throw the paper towel away, but when it stays stuck to his hands, he panics and accidentally ends up ripping the whole damn paper towel dispenser off of the wall because of his super strength. He then notices that he can see well without his glasses, and after he takes them off, he walks around the restroom and tries to tell himself that everything is fine. Unfortunately, he soon comes to an unsettling realization.
If there is one compliment that I can pay this series, it's that Spider-Man's voice actor, Robbie Draymond, is really good. His voice definitely has real emotional range, and he actually sounds like a kid. So Robbie, on the incredibly unlikely off chance that you are watching a negative review of a show that you're starring in, I just want to say, you're doing a good job, my guy. Keep it up.
Pete, you in here, buddy? Pete?
Wow, Harry, you're either the most apathetic motherfucker on the planet, or you're just a dumbass. Did you not see the busted down door that Peter left behind when he went into the restroom? If I had seen that, I would be pretty concerned for my friend's safety. At the very least concerned enough to do a more thorough check of the restroom that's supposed to be under construction. But no. Just shout his name a couple of times before you decide to walk out of the restroom. Good God, you're the worst friend ever.
I've got to get out of here. You'd think I'd share something this big with my best friend Harry, but my head was spinning and I felt like I needed to understand it myself first.
And that's a decision that I'm sure will never come back to bite you in the ass. I'm joking. I'm not going to rag on this series for sticking to the status quo like this. Peter keeping his superpowers a secret from his friends and family is an essential part of his character. No, my biggest problem with this pilot so far is the terrible pacing of its story.
We're about 5 minutes into this 20-minute long miniseries, and not only do we barely have any idea of who Peter Parker is as a character, but Peter has already developed his superpowers. Hell, the pilot opens with Spider-Man swinging around the city. Now, if you want to start your Spider-Man cartoon with Peter already being a superhero, that's fine. But if you're going to tell us his origin story, you need to take the time to set that story up properly. If you're not going to bother setting up any characters in the pilot episode, then why should I bother watching the rest of your show?
Okay, focus, Pete. You can do this. This is just a problem like any other, right? Now, how would a scientist go about solving this? Right! The 5 steps of the scientific method! Thank you, Madam Curie. And those steps are... observation, hypothesis, prediction, experimentation, and conclusion. No, Mr. Nobel. Panic is not one of the steps. That's something I added on my own.
Haha, Peter is so quirky. Hashtag relatable.
Peter walks down the street and explains what the audience already knows, which is that he got his superpowers from the radioactive spider that bit him at Oscorp. While he's crossing the street, his spider sense kicks in for the first time and warns him to jump. Peter does so and manages to avoid getting run over by a car. He then jumps out of the way of an oncoming bus and lands on the side of a building.
That kid! How's it doing that? Oh, can't deal with this now. Observations indicate that I have a spider's sense and a spider's stickiness. Whoa! I could never do this before. This could totally come in handy. But do I also have a spider's strength?
Hey Peter, didn't you knock down a locked door and accidentally rip a towel dispenser off a bathroom wall in the last part? I don't know about you, but I would take that as definitive proof that I had super strength.
Also, how the hell did Peter get out of his field trip? Did nobody ever notice that he wasn't with the class? Shouldn't Peter be worried about how he's going to explain him skipping school to his aunt and uncle?
Just raises too many questions.
In class, we learned that spiders can lift 173 times their own weight.
Hey guys, look at this. Somebody hand me my phone.
And have you get 1 million hits thanks to me? I don't think so, lady.
Oh my god, kids don't say hits, writers. This cartoon was released in 2017. Why are the characters using lingo from the early 2000s?
Part 2 ends with Peter busting through a brick wall, which confirms to him that he's got super strength. Part 3 begins with Peter vlogging his attempts to break down his powers by using the rest of the scientific method.
Spiders are incredibly agile. Me? Well, check out this video I took earlier of how well I've adapted. When normal people do this, they call it parkour. When I do it, I call it parkour.
Ugh. You know, usually I'm a big fan of bad puns, but that one was just too bad to be funny.
Spiders are devilishly handsome.
Are they though? Most people that I know are scared to death of spiders and consider them to be gross, disgusting creatures.
Spiders spin webs. Huh. Well, not so much for me. But that seems like something I can create in my lab.
Gee willikers, I wonder if this pilot is just going to breeze through Peter making his web shooters so that he doesn't have to go through any real challenges as a character.
Okay, I think I worked out all the kinks. Now, if they only just told time and played music, I could make a fortune. But can a watch do this? I think not. Touchdown! Or whatever it is you call it in baseball.
You never fail to disappoint me, Marvel Spider-Man. Also, Peter, the term is home run. Come on, you're a geek, not a moron. I'm tired of writers always using the same old joke that smart kids know so little about sports that they misuse basic terminology. I'm relatively smart, and I'm not even into baseball all that much, and even I know to call that a home run. This shit isn't funny, it's just dumb.
The next minute and a half are dedicated to gags of Peter messing around with his webs. I don't really have anything to say about any of these scenes, other than I'm surprised that Aunt May and Uncle Ben don't seem to notice all the fucking noise he's making, so let's move on. Peter decides that it's time to perform one final test to see if his webs can support him, so after webbing his face up to protect his identity, he jumps off a balcony and starts swinging through New York. He bursts with joy at the success of his test, only to crash into the wall, ending part 3.
We're only 10 minutes into this pilot, and yet I feel like I've been here for 10 fucking years. Whatever, let's just get this done as soon as possible so I can get to watching some good shows.
Part 4 begins with Peter trying to come up with a name for his secret identity, but none of the names he comes up with are any good.
You might know me as... Bug Boy? Too cutesy. Daddy Longlegs. Not tall enough.
Really, Peter? That nickname won't work because you're not tall enough, not because it's just a stupid nickname in general? Okay, if you say so.
As Peter monologues to himself about being on the third step of the scientific method, prediction, he happens to pass by the booth of a fortune teller. He blows her off at first, but after she tells him that she sees fame and fortune in his future, Peter agrees to let her read his palm. The fortune teller accidentally sets off Peter's web shooter and gets sprayed with a shit ton of webbing. She asks him if he's some sort of entertainer, which is exactly what Peter was thinking of becoming. While he's listing off all of the reasons why he should become an entertainer, the lady asks if he can take his webbing off of her.
You get me out of this web. Everything but that. I'm not actually sure how long the webs last yet, so... Huh? Make that an hour! The webs dissolve in an hour! I gotta go. Sorry, and thanks!
Hey, you owe me $10!
Our hero, ladies and gentlemen.
After that fiasco, Peter swings away and lands on a random building, where he begins to gush about how rich his spider powers could make him. However, he realizes that he can't go into show business without having a costume that hides his identity, so he goes back home and tries to whip one up.
What to wear? There's gotta be something in here I can use. Homemade Iron Man. Too Halloweeny.
Okay, so your issue with that costume is that it's too Halloweeny, not the fact that wearing a cardboard box that's painted like Iron Man's mask on your head makes you look like a dumbass? If this kid is New York's only hope against supervillains, then I think the city is fucking doomed.
Ta-da! Too obvious. Too much.
Are you kidding me? That costume is too much? No, it's not. That costume looks cool as all hell.
I'm serious. I genuinely think that this costume is badass. It looks like a modernized version of the Scarlet Spider costume from the 90s. Yet Peter thinks it's too much? The only issue that I have with it is the goddamn fanny pack he's wearing, but get rid of that and you've got a really good Spider-Man costume.
Really grinds my gears though is what the writers think is a better costume than the one I'm gushing over. Take a look at this clownery, guys.
Not bad. Thank goodness I have the resources.
You've got to be pulling my fucking leg. Is Peter seriously going to go with this costume as opposed to the last one? This outfit makes him look more like a bank robber than an actual superhero, and is so fucking generic that... Actually, I'm not surprised that this is what the writers went with.
As if the costume change wasn't infuriating enough, this part of the pilot also has Aunt May's only speaking line in the entire episode.
Peter, have you seen my blue tights?
I think they're called sweats, Aunt May. No, I haven't.
We're nearly 2/3 of the way through this pilot episode, and this is the first time that we ever see or hear Peter interacting with his family. It's not for anything serious either, it's just for the sake of a dumb joke. Hey writers, I'm not exactly sure if you know this or not, but Aunt May is sort of a prominent figure in Peter Parker's life, and I just think it would be really good for your pilot if you fleshed her character out a little. But everybody already knows what Aunt May is like. Yeah, well, everybody already knows what Spider-Man's superpowers are, so why did we need to dedicate an entire 6-part miniseries to Peter exploring them? If you're going to tell me Spider-Man's origin story again, could you at least try to make it somewhat interesting? Because this pilot isn't funny, it doesn't teach me anything new about Peter or any of his supporting cast that I didn't already know, and it doesn't even do a good job at building up the world that this cartoon is going to take place in.
Anyways, after Peter is done changing into his new costume, he swings off to try and come up with some way to break into the entertainment industry. While he's busy tossing ideas around, he happens to pass by a wall that's plastered from top to bottom with promotional posters for a nearby pro wrestling show. Peter notices all of the posters and decides to join the show, because having Peter work for anything would be far too stupid. Better for his problems to be solved by coincidences rather than good writing.
Any of you motherfuckers try to argue with me that life is just one big coincidence, I will end you.
Part 5 begins in a packed wrestling stadium as we hear a female announcer hyping the crowd up for the show that Peter joined, which is called So You Wanna Be a Wrestler. She then introduces her audience to Peter, who's going by the nickname The Spider, and we cut to Peter trying to tell the cameraman filming him a little bit about himself. Unsurprisingly, he bombs the interview with boring science crap because remember, the writers need to hammer in the fact that he's, like, super smart.
I don't know if you know this, but spiders are incredibly strong and have been known to live in every habitat known to man aside from the sea and air, of course. Commonly mislabeled as insects, spiders are actually from the arachnida class, which...
Can you just show us what you can do?
You know, as much as I've ragged on this pilot, it's nice to see that Stan Lee has a cameo in it. Plus, he has some of the best lines in this entire episode, which helps me a lot.
When the announcer tells Peter that he's going to fight a wrestler named Bonesaw McGee, he asks if Bonesaw is any good. She answers his question by playing him a short montage of wrestlers getting absolutely obliterated by Bonesaw before we cut to the man himself shouting about how badass he is in front of a camera. He then busts the camera lens with his head. Charming.
He broke the camera with his face.
Yes, Peter, I know. I have eyes which I use to see Bonesaw break that fucking camera. I'm not a dumbass.
What's going through your mind right now?
Honestly, the 5 steps of the scientific method. I'm up to step number 4, experimentation. I'm hoping this little wrestling stint will help me come up with the 5th step, which...
I meant regarding the wrestling match.
Oh.
I love how even Stan Lee is getting tired of Peter's annoying habit of inserting stupid science trivia in the middle of normal conversations.
As Peter is walking to the wrestling ring, a robber runs through the double doors that lead to the ring and passes by Peter in the hallway. Peter doesn't do anything to stop him, and the criminal manages to escape into the elevator. When the police officer who was chasing him chastises Peter for not doing anything, Peter tells him to piss off before he continues walking to the ring.
Hey writers, you handled that scene relatively well. It's not perfect. I mean, get a load of Peter's awful voice acting here.
Whoa! Out of my way, man! Not my problem.
But you were able to communicate the main point of this scene to us, which is that Peter has let his powers get to his head. So, good job. You got one thing right.
When Peter stands face to face with Bonesaw McGee for the first time, he gets scared, and then asks Stan Lee how long he has to fight, prompting this cute answer.
Just until the commercial.
You are my rock, Stanley. May you rest in peace.
I don't think I've ever looked forward to a commercial so much in my... Uh-oh. Spider said... Ow! A chair? I don't think that's...
Peter, this is a pro wrestling match. Pro wrestlers like to use folding chairs as weapons. It's kind of a thing.
Look out and remember, the steel chair.
I would think that a genius who's going to use his superpowers to win a local wrestling tournament would at least Google something about pro wrestling beforehand so that he would be prepared for what he might face.
Bonesaw throws Peter against the wall, and after the crowd begins laughing at him, Peter decides to throw web pellets at Bonesaw. He then immediately fights back, using his agility to avoid Bonesaw's attacks while landing more than a good amount of hits on him with his super strength. While Peter is busy kicking Bonesaw's ass, the two of them have a little exchange that serves as the moment when Peter decides to call himself Spider-Man.
Fight me like a man!
A Spider-Man!
Boo!
Peter proceeds to win the fight in a pretty overwhelming fashion. After the match is over, the announcer comes over and congratulates Peter on his victory. When Peter asks what he's won, she gives him a fairly funny answer.
A year-long tour of being our #1 wrestler!
Oh.
And this trophy.
So much for the fortune part.
I have to question why they hand out a whole damn trophy just for winning one match though. That seems a little odd to me.
Hey, Spider, give me a good pose, 'cause you're gonna remember this day for the rest of your life.
Oh geez, you guys. I wonder if anything bad is going to happen to Peter Parker. I sure hope that he doesn't suffer any unforeseen and ironic consequences as a result of using his powers for his own selfish gain, because that would just be awful. Come on, guys, would it have killed you to be a little more subtle than that? At least try to throw some suspense in, rather than just spelling shit out for the audience.
The final part of this pilot begins with Peter monologuing about how he won his pro wrestling trophy. After he describes what kind of metals the trophy is made of, he explains that Uncle Ben encouraged him to pursue science as a career.
He would have been proud of this trophy, but he'll never get a chance to see it. Because you know what else is made up of 3 different kinds of metal? That's what ended my uncle's life when he surprised a burglar earlier tonight.
That's right. Uncle Ben got shot and killed in a pilot where we, the audience, never even got to see him once. Hey, writers, I gotta ask, are you trying to piss me off, or does it just come naturally to you?
I know I've already asked this question once in this review, but I feel the need to ask it again. Are you fucking kidding me? You guys killed off Uncle Ben without him ever showing up in this pilot at all? Do you not understand how badly this fucks up the emotional core of this plot twist? The reason why Uncle Ben's death is so tragic in the original story is because in the comic, we got to see how close he and Peter were and how much Peter looked up to him. Stan Lee dedicated several panels to showing both Uncle Ben and Aunt May showering Peter with love and affection. They weren't incredibly fleshed out characters by any stretch of the imagination, but they had a very clear presence in Peter's life. Meanwhile, this pilot couldn't even be bothered to give either one of them more than a single speaking line. How am I supposed to empathize with Peter when I know jack shit about him and his family? The answer is I can't, because the emotional connection just isn't there. And it isn't there because these writers are hacks who don't understand who Spider-Man is as a character.
Let's just wrap this up already. I'm starting to get a headache.
Peter decides to go after the burglar, whom he learns is holed up in a warehouse. He puts on his costume and swings over to that warehouse. He then busts through a window and lands right in front of the burglar. The burglar tries to shoot him, but Peter disarms him and then uses his webbing to hurl him into some cardboard boxes. I'd like to take a moment and commend the voice acting from Peter here. He genuinely sounds furious and upset here, especially when he finds out that the man who killed his Uncle Ben is the same one who he let get away at the wrestling match earlier.
What have I done? What have I done?
Again, nice job, Robbie Draymond. You definitely earned the lead role.
The burglar tries to run away from Peter, but he gets caught by the police. We then cut to Peter standing around in his room and looking over the results of his experiment. He decides that fighting crime is not only the best way to use his powers, but the best way of honoring Uncle Ben's motto, with great power comes great responsibility. Which wasn't actually something Uncle Ben said in the original comic, it was just a narrative caption that Stan Lee added at the end of the story, but that's neither here nor there. Also, we see Peter swinging after a car chase in his regular costume at the end of the pilot, which begs the question of where in the hell he got this outfit. I mean, the writers dedicated an entire scene of this miniseries to Peter whipping up different costumes, but when it came to showing how he acquired his traditional costume, they conveniently left out that explanation. Good God, the writing in this is so fucking sloppy. Anyways, the pilot ends with this final line from Peter.
Know that although I've been called many things, a menace, amazing, spectacular, sensational, you'll know me best as Spider-Man!
If I'm going to be honest, parts 5 and 6 of this pilot aren't as awful as the other parts in terms of pacing. I mean, there are some stupid scenes here and there, and it's extremely disrespectful how poorly they handle Uncle Ben's character, but aside from those flaws, they are easily the best parts of this entire pilot. Unfortunately, getting only 2 out of 6 questions right on a test gets you a grade of 33%, and here in the United States, 33% gets you a hard F.
Holy shit. What more can I even say about this awful miniseries? I've already given y'all my major complaints with it. The story is poorly paced, the characters aren't properly developed in the slightest, and most of the jokes fell flat on their face. Most importantly though, as an introduction for the cartoon proper, this miniseries fails. It doesn't make me interested in either the world or the premise of the show, and it doesn't explain anything about the Spider-Man mythos that I didn't already know. Hell, I would argue that it actually explains less. Imagine, if you will, that this 6-part miniseries was your first introduction to Peter Parker as a character. What do you genuinely learn about him from watching this? Well, he's a normal kid who gets spider powers and loses his uncle because of a robber whom he let get away. That's it. This is the laziest retelling of Spider-Man's origin story that I've ever seen. The animation and character designs aren't even anything special either. Visually, this show looks way too much like that Voltron cartoon on Netflix, and that similarity is too distracting for me to get over. Other cartoons may have worse pilots than this, but when you fuck with my favorite superhero of all time, you earn a permanent spot at the top of my animation shit list. Fuck this miniseries.
Man, this was not a fun review to write. It was fun to film, don't get me wrong, but having to tear this pilot a new asshole was mentally exhausting, believe me. I'm not sure if I'll ever give Marvel's Spider-Man another shot. This pilot did absolutely nothing to hook me into it, but then again, I am a sucker for bad television, and judging by what Nintendo said in his review of this show, this is apparently the worst kind of bad television there is, so I may end up revisiting this series somewhere in the near future. For now though, I'm done. I need a fucking rest. If you need to watch a Spider-Man cartoon, I recommend that you stick with either the 90s shows or Spectacular Spider-Man. Those cartoons have far more effort put into them than the soulless crap that I just sat through. I'm Alex the Critic, and I'll see you guys next time.